Hey everyone, what is up? And welcome back for episode 55 of Higurashi When They Cry. So this is going to be the last episode of Chapter 6. This is going to include the bad endings. There were two choices on the last chapter of the game, last sub-chapter, that is, that we're going to look to see where they lead. It probably involves Rena murdering somebody, if I had to guess. I'm guessing things go horribly. They're not like canon, so it's not super important. But I figured I'd go through them just for fun. And the last episode, it got pretty long, so I figured I would do that right now. We also have the little the authors note section. I don't remember what they called it. It's not the all cast review session anymore. Staff room. The staff room is what they called it. So we'll do the staff room. And we'll also talk a little bit about theories, not for super long, because to be honest, the TLDR is my theories haven't really changed too much. Honestly, there hasn't been anything so egregiously wrong so far based on what we've been shown that I'm like, I have to completely modify my theories, right? It's not like I was, I don't know, it's not like I was convinced of, for example, whatever the craziness is, right? It's not like I thought it was, I don't know, I don't even want to, we still technically don't know, right? But the point is, anything, all the kind of, the little signs they've pointed us towards, right? They've seemed pretty accurate, like my old theories, right? So I haven't felt the need to fully redo them. So we'll briefly discuss some theories, but genuinely briefly, right? I don't think I need to go super in depth. So let's go ahead and load one of these up. I went ahead and just to make sure there were only two. I'm pretty sure I went through every sub chapter, I think besides the very first one on accident. I forgot to go through the first one just to check for decisions. Maybe I'll go through the first one real quick, just while we're here. But I think it was only those two decision points, but we will check real quick. This being called the Atonement chapter makes a lot of sense now, honestly. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's an accurate description. Humorous story with a tragic struggle at the end. No real difficulty. You can mostly just enjoy what's happening. It's not like you have to solve for anything crazy. I definitely think that there were some things that this kind of really brought to our attention. That we potentially need to answer, right? Hey, there's no way there was a branching decision on this day, but we'll just go through it anyways. Because, what's the harm, really? I guess besides getting a seizure from how fast it's moving, the text. Surely not, but I'm just gonna let it move. Like I said, I don't think there's anything here. Hold on. For some reason it felt like the audio was louder than normal. Maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know. Anyways, I guess kind of briefly what I was saying. Dude, looking at the audio meter, I don't know if I'm even louder than the game, but I'm gonna trust that I am, I guess. What I was saying is, this chapter, I think, has hints and whatnot towards potentially what's going on, specifically the tip at the end, though. Right? I think most of the chapter, it really was, you can just kind of play and enjoy it. But the tip at the very end recontextualizes some things, if that makes sense. So I do mostly agree that it's a zero difficulty. Kind of crazy, even if I'm just fast forwarding through it all, seeing this scene again right after watching the ending fairly recently.
委員長、あ、うん、今日、私、でも、本
Like
日の
knowing
戦い
where
は、
everything leads, and specifically that it's gonna end with another battle like that between Ren and Keiichi.
もう歌い、
It's just kind of crazy to see now.
リカちゃん捨ててあるよ。行こうぜ、みんな。
Yeah, there was nothing. I didn't think there would be, but you know, I was like, it can't really hurt. So we're gonna load it up. So let's go ahead and load up the first decision point.
何事もないことを祈りたいのです。
Just Rika saying she hopes nothing will happen, and we can either hit them with "it'll be all right" or "yeah, I guess." It's such like a who would answer with that, like, yeah, I guess, I hope we'll be all right. I guess that would be cool. Tarika-chan, who had whispered that,
ちょっと俺、ミオンのところに行ってくる。
How did that turn into "I'll go see Mion"? After taking my leave from them, I left the classroom and headed to the faculty office where Mion had gone to make a phone call. Oh, is that why? It's not like I could do anything, even if I stayed by her. I just hated staying still doing nothing but wallowing in anxiety. Oh, is this, like, before? Is this when she's... Right, this is when she's calling off... Okay, that was my misunderstanding there. Right, this is when she's calling off the, maybe I should have had some of the context from before. Maybe that would have helped. This is when she's calling off, the Sonozakis. Because they, like, the teacher got a phone call, like, Rena's over here, right? Like, come meet me here, and she just bolts, and Mion is, like, telling her people to follow the teacher. So I wonder if this is going to be Keiichi's like, don't do that.
若いのを2人ほど診療所に送ります。
まさかとは思うけどね。何をやらかすか分かったもんじゃない。
姿を見たら直ちにひっ捕らえてしまって構いませんか。
本当は嫌なんだけどな。どうしようね。
先日の会合で竜宮レナを確保して警察に引き渡すことで決着しています。ですのでひっ捕らえても一応筋は通ります。
うちの対面じゃなくて、レナの心情的に気の毒だなってこと。
Yeah, we've seen this exact conversation so far.
できたら本当に静かに決着したいんだけどね。
まあお若いですから、人さえ殺さなければ大抵はごめんなさいで済みますよ。
じゃあアウトかもだ。
いえいえ。見つからなければセーフですから。
She would never do anything insane. That would never happen on this day.
セーフ。沖宮の界隈ではあの二人の失踪を気にする者はいません。何かのヤバい話を踏んで夜逃げしたんだろうということになっています。
Yeah, 25 kids being held hostage. It ends up going a little differently.
あの程度のゴロつき、次から次へです。
In terms of how people feel about it.
ですからセーフ。
アウトだのセーフだの、私ら野球拳でもやってるわけ。まあいいや。それじゃあくれぐれもよろしくお願いします。
了解しました。ではひっ捕らえてよろしいんですね。
ちゃんとタッチアウトにするんだよ。
I wonder if this is like Keiichi observes the phone call and he starts tweaking or something.
クロスプレーなんかにしないようによろしく頼みます。
I don't know. What's gonna change here? I couldn't help but have a silly chat with Kasai-san. When I put the phone down, I sensed Chie-sensei was looking at me. No wonder, she'd been able to hear the conversation clearly in this tiny room. Okay, so I once again misunderstood the context. Okay, maybe I really should have, I probably should have had some of the context from before this scene. So, it's when, okay, she was worried that Rena was going to target the Irie clinic, and so she sent some of the Sonozakis over that way, and that's what she was telling Kasai. And then now, Chie comes in with this phone call and picks up. I think soon after this is when she picks up the call from Rena. So what's going to change as a result of this? I actually don't really know. Chie-sensei put her spoon down, and with a sad look on her face, she asked the following.
今の電話は竜宮さんをめぐる話ですか？まあ、はい。園崎さん、竜宮さんはどうして家出をしちゃったんでしょう？
So far, this is playing out the exact same.
お友達として何か知ってはいませんか？
It was hard for anyone to understand Rena's situation, except for me and Kei-chan. So most of them thought that Rena just ran away from home. But after she did, the cops made too much of a fuss over it. Oishi stupidly believed that the scrapbooks were a big scoop, and he overreacted in trying to find Rena. He had patrol cars running around everywhere in the village. He even used the town council's phone directory to find her. So people in the village thought Rena did something wrong and was trying to run from the cops. What was going to be difficult for me, more than finding her, was to make up a story to retrieve Rena's honor after they detain her. What about this? Rena went for a walk, fell down and hit her head on the edge of some tofu and lost her memory. Oishi misunderstood something big time, and he thought she was a criminal. It was too easy. Anyway, we did make it clear that Oishi was the one who misunderstood everything at the meeting the other day. I had to make the best use of his name while he was feeling down for once. What I'd have to do was to not make a big deal about this situation, and to create an environment that allowed Rena to forget everything that happened in order to get her life back together as soon as possible.
大丈夫ですよ先生。レナは今ちょっと病気になってるだけです。それを警察の某ベテラン刑事が素敵に勘違いして話をややこしくしただけです。
I feel like I could just skip through this.
まさかそれはもちろんですけど。
Like, because this is just literally all the same, right? Yeah, so far it's all the same. Okay, I think here's where it maybe starts to change. I made to leave the teacher's office to go back to the classroom, but right then the phone rang. Nope, still nothing has changed. J-Sensei had to answer the phone all day today because the principal was on a business trip. I exited to the hallway. Then I heard the tone of her voice change. What? I yelled and looked back at her. It was probably Rena. She called the school. I tried to go back inside the teacher's office, but Chie-sensei gestured at me not to come in. Chie-sensei acknowledged what Rena was saying several times, and then she looked up at the clock.
わかりました。今からすぐ行きます。先生との約束ですよ。
She said only that, put the phone down, and got her purse out of her locker.
院長、先生は休養ができました。しばらく表へ出ますので、みんなを自習させてください。
Like, Keiichi went to overhear this phone call, so is he gonna, follow Chie or something? I don't know. She took her car key out from her purse. It was obvious that she was gonna see Rena somewhere.
先生、今の電話はレナ。以上です。
Get ignored.
よろしく頼みますよ、院長。
Chie-sensei completely ignored me and she ran out into the hallway. She ran to the schoolyard and got into her car.
ケイちゃん！
どうした？チエ先生慌ててどこに行ったんだ？
Yeah, so this is where it starts to branch.
レナから電話があった。
なんて？
I ran after the teacher without answering that. Kei-chan followed behind me. She ran to the schoolyard and got into her car. The moment her car left through the gate, I ran out to the schoolyard myself. I headed for the black car parked near the gate and knocked on the window.
お疲れ様です。今のところ異常ありません。
違う。今出て行った先生の車を追って。多分行く先にレナがいる。
Is she gonna have him take Keiichi with him or something?
何？
Keiichi yelled in surprise, but there wasn't any time left to explain it to him now.
レナは警戒心が強いから注意してね。捕まえたら有無を言わさずに本家放り込んで、葛西の指示に従うこと。私の友人だよ。怪我なんかさせたら許さないからね。
Rena must have told Chie-sensei that she wanted to talk to her alone. I could tell that easily from the way she ignored my question. I did feel a little bad for ruining their promise, but it was very important that we caught her before she did something wrong. We could still make up an excuse that she was just wandering around because she had a fight with her father and ran away from home. But if she set fire to the clinic or something, there'd be nothing I could do.
ミオ、俺も行く。
ケイちゃん。
先生がレナのいる場所に向かったんなら、俺も一緒の方がいいはずだ。
Incorrect. I see the vision, but no.
そうだね。じゃあケイちゃん、早く乗って。
わかった。
Kei-chan opened the car door and swiftly climbed into the passenger seat. While we were dilly-dallying, the teacher's car was beginning to disappear from our line of sight. We could only pray we didn't lose sight of her.
よろしく頼んだよ、ケイちゃん。
ああ、任せとけ。
The car made a rough U-turn on the gravel road, and it chased after Chie-sensei's car at full speed. As they tailed the shadow of the disappearing car, I could only pray for this series of misfortune to end on a quiet note. No, it's going to end on an explosive one. If I had to guess. Chie-sensei's car soon came into view. It was traveling at a very fast pace, but thankfully she was the sort of person who didn't drive above the speed limit. We passed the stone steps of the Furude Shrine and left the paved road part way into a coarse mountain trail. Where we were headed wasn't even to the damn construction site, where the mountains of trash lay. We were headed to an unknown location which I wasn't aware of, so I was still unfamiliar with the area.
この道ってどこに続いてます？
山の方っすね。このまま行くと谷をまたいだ隣の町へのルートになるっす。
And as if it nodded in agreement with the driver's words, the vegetation around us opened up on one side, and we saw mountains in the distance and a valley between them. I saw a stream up ahead and a suspension bridge straddling it. According to him, there was certainly an According to him, there was certainly an unmanned office cabin in the vicinity set up for emergency purposes. Judging by Chie-sensei's panic, had Rena threatened to jump off from there or something if she didn't come? If so, then why exactly? That's right. Just why had she called Chie-sensei out to the suspension bridge? The sudden question triggered a throbbing anxiety, which spread across my chest. First of all, what did Rena even have to do with Chie-sensei? I mean, it's not like they were on bad terms. Rena was a good student, so she had a good relationship with her teacher. But it's not like she had a trusting relationship with her, enough to call her and consult her on such affairs. And also, why the suspension bridge? If it was a threat to jump off if she didn't come, the shrine had a good enough elevation for that. She didn't have to call her all the way out here. I was astonished, finally having understood Rena's intentions. Is this gonna be like a trap? Is this like a death trap or something?
Eh?
Wouldn't completely shock me. It'd be one way to get Chie completely out of the picture. And I don't know. I don't remember if we saw her or like know of her fate, like in chapter 6, right? Like otherwise. Rena seemed to think she was involved, so it wouldn't be completely shocking if like this was a death trap. As we noisily rang the car horn, Chie-sensei's car came to a halt, almost close enough to hit us, and she got down, looking stunned. After recognizing me in the passenger seat of the car behind her, she tried to yell out, but I beat her to it and cried, "We're in big trouble."
先生、俺たちレナに騙されたんだ。レナはここにはいない。
The teacher didn't understand what I was talking about and donned a confused expression. But there wasn't even any time to explain it to her, so I flew towards the phone booth near us, put a 10-yen coin in the slot and dialed the phone number to the staff room, which I vaguely recalled. I bet you Rena picks up. Please, somebody answer. Mio and Satoko Rika-chan. I don't care if it's somebody else either. I had to tell this to the people at school fast. So hurry. Hurry up and pick up the phone. And then, after the phone had rang around 10 times and I'd almost given up, the call went through.
もしもし。すみません。俺、前原です。すぐに園崎美音に繋いでください。もしもし？聞こえてるのか？もしもし？
I didn't know if it was because I was using an old phone or because the line was too far away, but I couldn't hear anything from the receiver. And then when I was about to raise my voice and yell into the phone...
何、ケイイチ君。みーちゃんに何か用かな？かな？
Yep, fantastic. My prediction was on the mark. It was even worse than I had imagined.
レナ、そこにいるんだな。
うん、いるよ。みーちゃんたちも一緒にね。ケイイチ君がいないのが残念だよ。
Yeah, maybe then the situation could have been fine.
一人じゃなかなかやりづらくって。うるさく騒いだり泣いたりして頭にきたから。
Oh, yeah.
何度か殴っちゃった。
Oh, yeah. So, with Keiichi not there, I'm not shocked that things broke down, right?
なんてこと。
That's about what I would have expected.
おい、レナ。いいか。ここにはチエ先生もいる。だから、落ち着いて俺の話を。は
あ、ケイイチ君はそっちに行っちゃったのか。だったら、お話はこっちで聞くね。早く来てね。待ってるから。
おい、レナ。待て、切るな。
Those words fell on dead ears. Rena, who was on the other side, swiftly ended the conversation like it was nothing. So we gotta go back. There's a pretty good chance that some of the students are severely hurt, possibly dead. Keiichi not being there certainly caused its fair share of problems.
沖宮 TS より全社へ、ひなみ沢営林署にて籠城事件発生、人質多数。 前者は至急ひなみ沢営林署へ向かわれたし。
Yep. Well, we've seen this more or less before. Let it play out for the time being, but are we gonna do the are we gonna have to do the whole hostage situation again? I kind of hope they're not that long, but we'll see. We're in this mostly just to see what the alternative endings are. I just hope they're not excessively long. Especially if they're gonna kind of repeat the same general beats, you know?
本日午後1時頃、
I don't
ひなみ沢営林署内のひなみ沢分校区画にて
surely
教室占拠が発生しました。
it won't be the exact same, right?
犯人側の第一要求は営林署敷地内への一切の立ち入りの禁止と当保へのホットラインの確保です。
ってことは初めっから警察と交渉する気ってことですか。どういうつもりだ。
あと犯人は交渉人に大石さんを指名してます。犯人は竜宮玲奈。
竜宮さんが
I might start skipping through some of this because I'm like 99% sure nothing has changed with this scene.
とことんお付き合いさせてもらいましょう。
カーテン担任と
計画的ですね。
よって生徒24名のみ。生徒ですが
レナちゃんはとても真面目ないい子なんです。
Wait, okay, I think Chie had this exact line. Whatever I was thinking earlier about Chie, I'm like 99% sure it was wrong. I think she just wasn't able to get back in the building. I don't know how she has such like a minor role. I completely forgot it. Yeah, it was just a diversion to keep her from being there. It wasn't like she was trying to kill Chie, I don't think. Right? Because looking back at this, I am pretty sure now in retrospect that this is what happened before.
大丈夫ですか。
大石殿、よろしくお頼みします。
先生が図面の
1号車の無線に高杉課長です。
Yeah, because I remember this part, them asking to be taken hostage. Yeah, no, they got back
競
just
争
fine.
の大体は熊。
早速出ることにします。
Okay, now here we go. This is all new. Everything else was the exact same. I'm not trying to skip through things necessarily, but like I said, when it's the exact same, I'm like, you know, not as inclined to read it again. Depending on how long this is going to be, especially, because if they're going to make this relatively lengthy, then I don't want to go through the entire hostage scene again just to realize 75% of it is the same, you know? I clenched my teeth in frustration and rolled up my fists into a ball. An overwhelming wall of police officers blocked my way, and I felt pathetic for only being able to watch the teachers and the detectives from afar. The reason behind why Chie-sensei had been phoned and summoned out of the school, for Rena who wanted to hijack the classroom, the biggest obstacle was Chie-sensei. She was someone who had a strong sense of justice. Even if Rena had held a pistol to her, Chie-sensei probably wouldn't have hesitated. For the welfare of her students, she would put herself in danger. Getting rid of someone like her was the primary step in order to hijack the classroom. Funny enough, I think we actually saw these exact lines too. Attacking her from behind would have been her very first line of thought, but I'm sure she decided taking on an adult was a risky affair. In that case, it was better to lure her away to someplace. Ren had then phoned Chie-sensei and then told her she wished to seek her advice in someplace private, and asked to meet her near that suspension bridge. Including Chie-sensei, a good majority of the people thought Rena had merely run away from home, so Chie-sensei probably thought Rena merely had some trouble she wished to discuss. Fooling her was that easy. So, where did Rena make the call from? Yes, it was from within the school. Well, not exactly. It was most likely from the second floor of the school building, from the office room of the forestry service. The forestry service at our school was more like a branch office, so it wasn't like the staff were always present. Depending on the day, they might not even be there. Ren had known this, and had been hiding on the second floor all this time. And then she'd made a phone call to the ground floor from up there, and sent Chie-sensei to a faraway place. It probably wasn't a coincidence that the principal had also been away on a business trip today. Ren had most likely snuck into the school yesterday itself, and then she had discerned the principal's itinerary and the workings of the internal phone line before she put her plan into action. Yeah, I mean, we've seen all of this for sure. How cunning it all was. No, I understood. Right now, even as she was possessed by a murderous rage, Rena was keeping her composure. She was unbelievably calm despite being plagued by her delusion that controlled her, and so just thinking about it made my head spin, because I had even personally experienced what she was going through before. Also, what was even more unlucky was the absence of the Sonozaki family bodyguard who had been standing by the gate. It was because Mion had sent him to follow Chie-sensei who had set out to meet Rena. Fuck, everything was so screwed up on so many levels.
今ですね、県警の暴隊と公安部で一斉捜査作戦を準備中なんです。何しろ市内全域を一斉にやりますからね。調整に多少の時間が。
So this is the part where we're on the phone, but without Keiichi there as like a middleman, things probably go differently.
遅すぎる。大石さん、私たちは今、獅子骨氏が置かれている緊急的危機についてよく理解し合っているんじゃなかったでしたっけ？
Because we definitely skipped a decent bit of that phone call.
何をのんびりとしたこと？大石さん、本当に私の話を信じてくれているんですよね。私の味方なんですよね。味方ですよね。答えてください。
もちろんですとも。ですが、警察組織ってやつは簡単じゃないんです。私も最大限努力をしてるんですよ。ただですね、やはり話の規模があまりに大きすぎるもので。
The negotiations weren't that satisfactory, to be honest. Even as they spoke, it was clear from the overwhelming tension that Rena's patience was wearing thinner and thinner.
じゃあ、圭一君を呼んで。
Okay, well that kind of works.
今何とおっしゃいました？
そっちにいるんでしょ？彼と話をするから、早く呼び出して。
わかりました。
Well, this almost can kind of get us back on track, but I mean, it's not going to get us fully back on track, obviously, or there wouldn't have even been a choice there. Oishi asked one of his subordinates to summon the boy who stood in the front line of the crowd gathered at the barricade. He immediately jogged over to the car as soon as he was called.
前原圭一さんですね。
はい。
竜宮レナさんがあなたと話がしたいそうです。通話代わってもらえますか？
わかりました。
Oishi then handed over the receiver to Keiichi and he noticed something happening outside and left the car.
もしもし。
圭一君、よかった。戻ってきてくれたんだね。
レナ。
警察がね、レナの言うことを信じてくれないの。レナの言ってることが本当で、レナがやろうとしてることが本気だって。圭一君からも言ってくれないかな？
I'm curious how he responds to this, given the situation. Is he just he might play into things, or is he in this variation, knowing she's already started hurting people, maybe he doesn't decide to play along?
やろうとしてることってなんだよ。
今この教室にね、ガソリンをまいたの。だから、レナが持ってるライターでちょっと火をつければ、ここにいる人質はみんな死んじゃう。それを大石さんに教えてくれないかな。
なんですかあんたたちは。
どきたまえ。ここの責任者は誰だね。
So the Sonozakis are... Wait, no. Those aren't the Sonozakis. We've been through this before. This is the other police department. Maybe with with Keiichi known on the inside, they probably aren't going to have any leverage to be like, we've got this, right? Not that they really had that much before. They just kind of took things over by force again, right? So they're probably going to do something stupid that, like, gets everyone killed. Several cars had arrived, producing several men. They weren't from the Okonomiya station. One of the men was wearing a suit, despite the hot weather. He approached me, pushing Kumagai aside.
おや、これは。お久しぶりですね。県警本部の大高くんじゃありませんか。
言葉を慎みたまえ。もう君に君と呼ばれる階級ではない。
何かご用ですかね、大高くん。
I just love this stank he puts on that. He's like, I'm not changing anything about how I address you.
今非常に立て込んでいます。まさか県警がこの現場を乗っ取ろうつもりで？誰の了解で？
私が許可した大石君。
所長。
高杉君から事情は聞いている。君がまいた種だという話も聞いているぞ。君はもう下がって、あとは機動隊に任せるんだ。
機動隊って。大高君。
Well, they don't even know about the gasoline right now. Oh, that's bad.
危険は重々承知
They're all
だ。
barbecue chicken.
だがもう爆発まで時間がない。君が時間を浪費しすぎたのだ。 その尻拭いを我々がしようというんだ。
Yeah, they're all about to get barbecued.
君らは引き継いで後方に下がりたまえ。
I couldn't talk back if both the chief and a guy from the prefectural headquarters gave me an order.
おいさん、何者っすかあいつは。
大高くん。昔麻雀がくっそ弱いくせに生きがってたからちょいと叩き潰してやったことがあ
Just
りました
love that
ね。
that's how he remembers him.
それともあれかな、剣道大会で偉そうにしてやがったから面食らわして失神させたのを根に持ってるのかな。
Obviously, we didn't get along.
大石君、現在の最新の状況を説明したまえ。
あんた本気で突入する気で。
突入は府警の専門部隊が担当する。君はバックアップに回りたまえ。
社長。
おい石君、府警の専門部隊はただの機動隊じゃないぞ。第二機動隊といえば君ほどの男なら噂くらい聞いてるだろう。
Yeah, not one mention of the gasoline yet. They absolutely have no clue. Keiichi's not going to tell them until it's too late, I'd bet.
なんすかおいさん、第二機動隊って有名なんですか。
Yeah, we've read all this.
5年くらい前だっけ、空港の飛行機に犯人が立てこもった事件があったでしょう。あれをきっかけに東京と大阪にハイジャック専門の特殊部隊が組織されたって噂は聞いてましたがね。実在してましたか。
でもなんだって府警の機動隊がこんなところに。
Otaka smiled proudly.
たまたま県警機動隊との交流訓練があってね、特別に応援を要請したのだよ。
相変わらずですね。話をすぐ派手にしたがるその癖は。
Yeah, that's exactly what's about to happen. But, you know, with Keiichi not on the inside, in all fairness, I don't know, with the knowledge they have right now, there probably isn't a better solution. Like this does seem like a reasonable solution. It's just, you know, we have the knowledge that this is going to end terribly. The company members exited the vehicles one after another and took position. They didn't move like policemen.
大高君、あんた学校で銃撃戦をやる気かい。
安心したまえ。突入犯が使うのは火器じゃない。ボート鎮圧用のガス銃だ。高圧ガスで催涙ガスを噴出する。何の問題もない。
へえ、そりゃ便利な水鉄砲があったもんで。
Can kind of keep the same dialogue from like when they knew there was gasoline all over the place.
ところでそのおもちゃは校庭を横断して教室まで届くほど便利なものなんで。
それは君が心配することではない。あとは我々に任せて下がりたまえ。
And then, following Otaka's orders, the special forces took position at a blind spot visible from the school window and prepared to infiltrate. Oishi wrinkled his nose at Otaka's arrogance and pretentious attitude that didn't give way for counter-arguments. Remembering that Ren and Keiichi were having a conversation, he turned on his heel heading over to the patrol car. Oh yeah, it's too late. And there...
大変だ刑事さん。
At once, the door to the car swung open and Keiichi rushed over to him, screaming.
どうしました前原さん。
レナが教室内にガソリンを撒いたって。
No.
Gasoline? I didn't hear that there was something so inflammable in the vicinity. No, it's not about that right now.
射撃用意。構え。
待ってください。やめろ。撃つな。
ふて
Yep, GG. And our bodies were promptly blown away and hit the ground. We didn't understand what had happened for a moment. Jesus, everything got blown to smithereens. A high-pitched tinnitus violently reverberated within my skull, and an overwhelming dizziness distanced me from my consciousness. My throat and nasal passages felt irritated from the suspended dust particles and smoldered air. Spitting out the crunchy debris from my mouth, I dragged my beaten body up into a stance and faced forward, looking ahead of me. There ain't nothing left. There were many police officers scattered about on the ground, groaning from the impact. A voice of agony filled the air next to me. As I faced it, it turned out to be the detective I'd been talking to just now. Bro, like dying or something? His entire body was covered in dirt and debris, and he was bleeding from his head. As I began to sit down in concern for him, I suddenly remembered Mion and Rena's safety. There is no safety Yeah. Goodness. Goodness. And then I turned towards the direction of the school. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What stood before me was a disordered conglomerate of wood, bricks, and other distorted articles mixed in, crudely resembling an enormous camping bonfire. The flames that had risen up in between that mass burned so high they seemed to reach up into the evening twilight. Even from this faraway distance, I could perceive the heat and the scorching smell. No, this had to be a dream. This couldn't be our school. No, this wasn't even a school in the first place. I staggered over. Fumbling forward with my useless legs, I walked over to that monstrosity. And then before me, amidst the crumbled remains of timber, I discovered a face I recognized and drew a breath before I rushed over. You discovered a face? We're ignoring the recognized part. How? A building getting blown to smithereens like that? And we're discovering intact people? I don't know. I would have assumed that was not a possibility. I'm not an explosions guru. Maybe I'm massively, underestimating how much force is required to render somebody in the blast radius of an explosion to be completely unrecognizable. Maybe it requires a lot more force than that, but for the sake of the story, let's move on. Mion's eyes were wide open, facing my way, with her right arm raised. Her mouth was slightly open. She probably couldn't speak. I had to get her out of here first. Thinking that, I tightly grasped that right arm. Is it about to, fall off? It felt light. There was no resistance. And then, from within the rubble, it came out. And then a small mass rolled over and touched my feet. Mion's head had come apart from her body. Yeah. Look, that is more what I expected for sure. Poor guy. Yeah, bad end. Okay, so while this is obviously a non-canon ending, I do think this one is kind of interesting in the sense that while we already knew this, it really demonstrates how important for Rena's remaining sanity it was that I don't even want to say Rena's remaining sanity, actually. How important Keiichi just happening to be there was to the situation. Right? I mean, don't get me wrong, she was obviously already, losing her patience even a little more so than I felt than when Keiichi was there, with her having mentioned that she'd already hit people, right, several times, right? Which she does eventually do to Mion anyways, right? Well, Keiichi is there, but she seemed to have done it earlier. Either way, though, it just kind of goes to show how fortunate in this scenario it was that Keiichi was exactly where he was, right? If he wasn't there as the inside man, and if Oishi hadn't managed to hold off the counterterrorism unit for a little bit because of the threat of the gasoline, things obviously could have played out very different, and they could have played out like this if they didn't know about the gasoline in there that would cause that massive explosion, right? It's not a groundbreaking discovery. It's pretty obvious, but it's kind of interesting to see the bad end. To a degree, it's pretty interesting, and I mean, it was pretty gory. Right at the end, right? That was messed up. Just Mion's severed head rolling onto his feet. That's crazy. That's definitely kind of insane. I do think it was still a relatively interesting scene. I mean, I would have been fine if I'd never seen it, but it was cool to see, honestly. I like viewing bad ends, even if they don't really push the plot a lot of the time. There are plenty of bad ends in visual novels that are not really, that important that you read. But I still like to read them most of the time. So next up, we're going to read the other bad end, and I do have a little more context for that bad end, by the way. That bad end is... It's in the middle when they're trying to figure out the location of the bomb, basically. And, Keiichi kind of calls out to Satoko regarding the bomb's location. Actually, I mean, we can just kind of go here and then here. And we can do a little bit of skipping until we get to the choice and read a little more of the context so that it makes a little more sense. So I'm not confused for the first few minutes, you know?
それよりおじさんが気にかかるのはの
っておい俺さもともと例え
Man, even if that was a bad end, and it was obvious given the situation that things were going to end bad, and probably exactly how they did. Why'd they have to do Mion like that? Why'd they have to do Mion like that? Why couldn't they have just done like, I couldn't find any of my friends? Instead they were like, you found her severed head. It's like, okay, okay.
クロスプレイなんかお友達として
Yeah, so this all remains relatively the same. We kind of go a while, like, pretty far in before this next one, so I imagine this is going to be a pretty short bad end, to be honest.
怪我なんかさせたら許さないからという
自主練うまくじゃあ
We're just going to keep skipping, like I said. I want some of the context, at least.
教室の真ん中に
Hi, Rena.
みんなにレナだから信じていいんだよね
みんなレナ
Not too much to say right now. We're just waiting for it to skip as far as we need it to, which is pretty far in, so it might be a minute or two. You know, it's kind of interesting. I didn't really think about this, especially now that we know the whole, like, time looping thing is going on, right? It's kind of funny to think that, in theory, all of the bad endings can be canon, actually. These can just be timelines where things just went ever so slightly wrong, but were very similar to the main story otherwise. I don't know if there's going to be like a major plot point where it was exactly a certain amount of timelines, for example, but it doesn't seem to be that way. Like, it seems like were many more that weren't necessarily seen. And that's why it's probably so easy to make, like, side chapters for the game, right? Because there's the potential for so many extra chapters, which also applies to the bad end, right? Like I said, not a huge deal. It doesn't, like... It doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just kind of interesting that they don't just have to be bad ends, right? They can technically be a different canon world line. Whereas in a game like Fate, to my knowledge at least, right, in Fate Stay Night, all of the bad endings are completely non-canon, right? There is no... I mean, I don't know. It seemed like there was a lot more going on in Fate, potentially. I don't really fully remember everything. But for the most part, I don't really know. Well, I'm trying to think of a good example of a game with bad ends like that. Where it is straight up, like, there is no doubt that is not canon. There's no world where it's canon. You know? Strangely enough, a lot of the games... Actually, technically the first Danganronpa game has a bad end that is obviously not canon. I don't know. But this is definitely a game more so than a lot of other games, where, I feel like the bad ends can be canon. You know? Kind of just going on about this for a little longer than I need to, but it's still going, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I knew this was a very long scene. I knew this was an extraordinarily long scene, like the whole hostage scene, but when you're trying to skip to the end of it, you don't... I didn't realize just how long it was, I guess. Until now I'm skipping towards the end of it, you know? I think we're getting pretty close, at least, but... Okay, I think this is right around where it is. Maybe not. Okay. Hold on.
君がまいた種だという話も聞いているぞ。
Because I know it stops at the choice, but... So this is where they kind of get the gang together a little bit. And Rena's on the phone with like Oishi, who's kind of he's kind of distracting her so that Keiichi can get some time, right? But Satoko and Rika kind of listened into the conversation. They realized the situation, obviously, and know about the extra bomb, and they're trying to. They seem to understand Rena's situation and sympathize with her, because I'm guessing Satoko's been in those same shoes before. Rika obviously knows exactly what's going on, so they decided to trust in her, and are trying to figure out where that like time bomb is so they can save everyone. They're basically putting their hope in Satoko to find it. That's the context so far, is that they need Satoko to find the bomb, which, to be fair, I already knew that context, to be honest. So I probably could have skipped this. Okay. Right around here. This is where Keiichi gets baited. He gets baited, he gets saved by Rika, and then he has the brief talk with Satoko. Okay. So, now here's the split, so we can look at... Why can't I look at the dialogue? Are we serious? Okay. Okay, I can, I just have to actually click log. I can't just scroll, which I usually can. So yeah, like I said, now is we got baited into checking that closet. Satoko realized that it was bait and that it wouldn't actually be there. Rika kind of clutches up his whole life. We get the lighter. And now, this is where we either tell Satoko, you should be able to figure it out, or just, are you still there, Satoko? There's no time. Again, a lot of these choices, the interesting thing about them is they're pretty close, right? In terms of what they're actually saying. I'm like, look, you can obviously argue there's a tone difference in those sentences, but like, looking at them blind, how am I supposed to know which one is correct? I guess, like, I don't know. Like, looking at it, I'm like, it's such an asinine decision, right? It looks the exact same, right? For the most part. And it's, I assume, going to lead to an entirely different scenario. Alright, so let's see how this changes things. There still wasn't any reply from Satoko. Shit, if we don't find out where Ren has hidden the incendiary device... I don't know why that threw me off so much. Shit, if we don't find out where Ren has hidden the incendiary device quickly... We managed to confine her to this space, but finding the device is what's really important. Please, Satoko, you're the only one we're counting on. Did he even say anything out loud? I don't think he did. Rena, who had thrown Rika-chan aside, swung around to face me as she stood up, her eyes glittering with fury. And then, with an icy jeer enough to make my hairs stand on their ends, she raised her hatchet above her head. Shit! Adrenaline gushing through my veins, I twisted my body to barely dodge Rena's attack as the hatchet sliced through the air. The hatchet she had swung recklessly sunk into the wooden floor with a thunderous roar, and Rena retracted it as if it were nothing and held up once more as she sniggered, flashing her red tongue in mirth. So it seems like we're just not getting a reply from Satsuko here. So like, what's going on? Is my question.
さよなら。
She just killing us? She's just killing us.
レナに謝ってもいいよ。
Fuck. I wasn't supposed to be wasting my time doing this. If I don't hurry up, the explosive device Ren has set up is going to... And then it was immediately after Satogo's desperate scream that it all blows up. Anything and everything in the world before me disappeared into the void, including myself. Okay, so that's it. Well, at least that one was quick, right? That one was pretty quick. Once we actually got to it. So what? He didn't call out to Satsuko, so he got stuck fighting with Rena for a while. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's all that really changed. Okay. Let's go ahead and check out the staff room. There really wasn't much to that. I don't think there's literally anything I need to say in response to that, to be honest. Let's go ahead and check out the staff room. Hello, my name is Ryukishi07. I hope you enjoyed playing Higurashi When They Cry Ho, Chapter 6, Sumi Horoboshi. There are several themes I wanted to write in this chapter, but I'd like to talk about one of them here. It's about the denial of murder. This is something I had to write sooner or later, since this is a novel about serial murders. There are two means that youngsters in particular use these days to solve problems, which are murder and suicide. When we feel stress, we choose to either get rid of the source of the stress or to get away from it. Let's say you're bullied by a kid at school. You have two ways to solve the problem. You choose either to get rid of the kid from your current environment, or to get away from the environment itself. Usually, bullies are stronger and have their underlings, so you don't stand a chance alone to get rid of them. It's also not easy to switch classes or to quit school, so you can't easily get away from the situation. As a result, the situation gets worse by the day, and your stress urges you to solve the problem immediately. And you come up with murder or suicide as easy solutions. If suicide is considered defeat, you'd want to consider murder. I feel like there are many people who think that way. However, if you actually committed a murder, it wouldn't be easy to pay for the sin. I believe murderers know that well too. But you really hate the bully who pushed you to the limit where you have no choice but to kill him, so with a determination that turned your entire life upside down, you commit murder. But if you have such strong determination, there have to be more ways to take than opting for murder, which should be the last resort. You can talk to your friends. If that doesn't work, you can talk with your family. If that doesn't work, you can talk to your teacher. If that doesn't work, then what? There have to be more ways. If you have the determination to give up on your life by committing murder, there have to be more ways. Our modern era is better than any era before it. There are many hotlines that you can call to talk to someone. Even if you don't have any friends or family, there are many places you can go for help. The people who will answer the phone aren't amateurs. They're volunteers, but they're also veterans who have worked as social workers or juvenile counselors for a long time. I can assure you that they have more social experience and passion than your parents do. People who work to help people for free can't be bad people. If you feel like you have no choice but to kill the bully or commit suicide, please try to call those hotlines. People who think it's useless to talk to others usually haven't really talked to anyone. Have the courage to call. There will be somebody you can completely rely on at the other end of the line. Don't keep it to yourself. Talk to somebody. Ryukishi07 wrote such a long story just to tell you this. He must be a very poor writer. So Ryukishi07 wants to talk to you all, rather than worrying all by himself. How can I write even more entertaining stories? 07th expansion, Ryukishi07. Okay, well that was a short one. Not really much to digest there. It's not like it was talking much about the chapter itself, just kind of like, it was kind of basically that a very simple, like exactly what it said, like, murder's a last resort, right? And it should, like, if you have the determination to kill someone, like, probably in the vast majority of scenarios, there are so many other ways to escape that scenario that you should try first, right? Rather than jumping to the last resort. Like, you can reach out to people for help. I think that was honestly, the bigger thing there isn't necessarily just that it's like, don't jump to murder. It's that there are people out there who can help you. Which I think is a nice thing to talk about. Pretty simple idea. It's not like it really pushed the story or anything, but that's okay. It didn't need to, right? I think we can generally all agree with the message that you should not commit murder, and that you should explore every avenue possible before doing something like that, right? Okay, so I took a break in the middle of this episode, so I actually don't know how long we're at, but this is already, it's honestly a little shorter than I expected, not by that much, though. But let's talk a little bit like theories. This shouldn't be super long because the big things to talk about are the big things that they haven't fully revealed. And I think there's still a few things they haven't fully revealed regarding the grand scheme of the plot, but I think there's 3 to 4 major ones that I'll briefly give some of my thoughts on. First of all, you have the very obvious one of who was responsible for the Great Disaster. We see through this tip in this chapter that whoever also, I guess just the question is more just the Great Disaster in general. Who is it? Why are they doing it? Right? What exactly is it? We see this chapter that despite the seemingly happy ending, or at least moderately happy, right? Like, yeah, Rena might be getting locked up, but she didn't kill anyone, and everyone made it out safely, right? You know, it seemed relatively happy until the tip afterwards, where we learn that Great Disaster still happens, and that, Rika dies, like, basically everyone dies, besides maybe Rena. I think I saw someone comment that, like, they talked about Rena being like in confinement, right? And unless in one day they had her ready for trial and like there were lawyers, because like that's they talked about, like, they made it sound like there was like a legal defense, right? Like strategy, and when the disaster happened literally that night, right? Like, or the next morning, it's like that doesn't really make sense. So I think it's safe to say Rena survived, which, like, if that's true, that's terrible. Could you imagine Rena, like, hearing, like, yeah, all of your friends just died? She might go back for round 2 of being crazy, right? Either way, though, the point is, it seemed like a happy ending, and then it wasn't, which really proves that, to me, the Great Disaster is completely detached from the events of certain chapters, right? The Great Disaster is not linked to Chapter 3. It is just what happens, probably, if I had to guess. It happens specifically in Chapter 3. We know it's happened in whatever timeline Chapter 4 is in, which I don't think is the same timeline as Chapter 3, because we know some basic things like Oishi is missing in Chapter 3, whereas he's obviously not missing in Chapter 4. So unless he's reappeared in Chapter 4 with literally no fuss, right, and they don't mention Keiichi in, like, at all when they talk about survivors, it just doesn't feel like those two are the same thing. So presumably the Great Disaster is also its just own thing in Chapter 4, which is a different timeline, and then it's its own thing again in Chapter 6, which is its own timeline. If it happens that many times independently, you gotta think this is just the grand goal of the villain, who I obviously think is Takano, right? We've been over this a million times. I don't think I really need to go over it too much more, but she's just very obviously suspicious, and then when you combine basic things like she's always the one kind of fear-mongering people who go crazy, and she does it like a few days before they go crazy every time, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think she's just setting off a chain of events every time, right? And, like, she does it through manipulation into forcing someone else to kind of go crazy, and then they're the ones responsible for curse killings, right? It could very well just be that simple, right? That her manipulation of people is what causes the curse killings, right? She kind of makes them feel very strongly in one way or another, right? And they snap, and kind of are inflicted by the Hinamizawa craziness. Because, like I said, I'm guessing, and I guess this bleeds over into the next point a little bit. We can kind of mix them together. The Hinamizawa craziness, if I had to guess, it's like something that's dormant within everyone in Hinamizawa. And those strong emotional breaks are what really cause people to be susceptible to it. And it's only when they get back in their right state of mind that they're kind of over it. We've seen now twice that you can mostly just get over it if you're, like, brought back to reality, right? We saw it in Chapter 5 with Shion when she went actually ballistic in the classroom, and like was just, like, pummeling, right, Satoko, right? Like, if I remember like correctly, she went ballistic in that classroom, and I remember that Sachi was obviously not very pleased about that. But point is that was her well on her way to being crazy, and then like Mion kind of calms her down, right, to a degree, and then she snaps again later. But point is, she snapped out of it in that moment, right? She she it doesn't affect her, right, permanently. And even if you argue that's not the same, it doesn't 100% matter, because we see very clearly in this chapter that when Rena is like confronted by her, like by Keiichi, and is brought back to kind of the good times, she eventually snaps out of everything, right? She snaps back to being kind of normal Rena. And so it kind of shows to a degree that it really is controlled by that emotional state of mind. And so that it is probably something dormant within them that only really works when their emotional responses are like going crazy, right? They're extremely stressed, extremely scared, right? Like any number of things, right? Some extreme feeling. And I just think Takano is just making people feel that way, and that's what's setting everything off every year, right? So, point is, I think Takano is the villain, right? And that's what she's doing every year, and I think the Great Disaster is her end goal. Why? That's a harder question to answer. I mean, I'm going to go with the simple, she's just trying to bring back that old fear of Hinamizawa, right? Of Onigafuchi, right? Things like that. Which makes enough sense to me to rock with. Even if it's not super detailed, it makes enough sense. The real question is, though, what exactly is the Great Disaster? Because in the tip that we saw, they strongly allude to the fact that the Great Disaster probably is not actually volcanic gases like everyone wants to believe. Right? It probably isn't some scenario where the gases are just like it's a controlled leak, right? Because there's no corrosion of the metals, and I think arguably bigger, and this should have made it obvious to me in the first place, is that Keiichi didn't die in Chapter 3 when he was directly in the path that the volcanic gas would have needed to take. And so I think this strongly suggests that like the gas is not what's really happening. So what actually is happening then, right? I have to assume that it's something related to what, like the whatever is dormant in Hinamizawans and causing the craziness. I don't know exactly what, but we've clearly already gotten a little supernatural, so I don't think it's unfair to get a little supernatural and say that, like, look, if I think that these are parasites, right, which I still do, right, and I think there was in the tip, there was a little bit of evidence to maybe support that theory when they were talking about like the blood tests for people that were working within the swamp to seal it. They'd get blood tests results, and suddenly they would be dismissed from the swamp, right? And in a world where it's not that far-fetched to believe that those are the parasites, right? Being found, right? Those microbial parasites, right? Which I already suspected, and they kind of talk about in this chapter, and like even Akasaka seems to kind of believe it. And I think it kind of makes sense, right? But let's say these parasites are a thing. What if Takano just has a way to, like, I don't know, activate all of them at once, right? And it kills everyone with it. I don't know. That's the best I've got. I don't necessarily love it, but like if it's not volcanic gas, you can't assume that one person is just like any one person is just murdering a whole town like that. So I assume it's almost like a time bomb, right? Like that's what makes the most sense to me. Or maybe it is some kind of gas, but it's only a gas that affects people like that already have whatever is latent to these Hinamizawans. But that's more or less my guess as to what's happening, is that it's not volcanic gas, rather it's like some kind of attack on whatever is allowing people to go crazy. That's really my best guess. And like I said, probably just as a way to bring back like that old fear of Hinamizawa, because it seems like that successfully happens in chapter 3 based on what we saw. And something kind of interesting, and that I think is a lot more likely now, is the possibility that in chapter 1 in particular, the great disaster does probably happen. In chapter 2, I'm actually not sure. And I wonder if that throws a wrench in my theories. I might have to check that out before I start 7. I'm not gonna like do a full-on theory video and like start digging right now, but I thought chapter 2 went for a decent bit after the normal disaster date. Hmm. That's kind of interesting. So maybe I need to think on that a little more, actually. Like I said, I'm not going to spend like a ridiculously long amount of time thinking on it. We're at the point in the game where I'm like, I just want to keep going. So I'll probably like investigate a little bit tonight, and if I change my theories up a little bit, I'm sure I'll say it at the start of chapter 7. But we're going to move past that for now. I think the other thing we kind of already talked about it was like, what exactly is the craziness? I kind of already said, I think it's parasites, right? And I think it's maybe supported by some textual evidence here. I've talked about who I think the ultimate villain is. Another thing I am a little curious on is if the whole like alien thing they alluded to in chapter 6 is going to be accurate. Look, oddly enough, almost everything Rena said was actually like, I don't want to say correct, but not unreasonable, right? In retrospect. You have the parasites, which I'm like, okay, I already believed that, right? You have her being convinced there's a bioterrorism act. I'm like, okay, that literally happens. I think Rena's intuition is just really sharp, and you gotta wonder if that means even crazy Rena was like low-key right? And then you got the whole alien thing, right? And it's like, okay, surely not. But then Akasaka's like, why did they seal the swamp? Like, with concrete. It's like, they probably found something there. And it's like, look. It could be aliens. I don't know. Right? Like, it could be. Honestly. It genuinely could be. Right? I think we're at a point in the game where we have at least two supernatural entities, possibly 3. If it depends on if you believe that whoever the villain is also kind of remembers timelines, which I think is relatively possible. That doesn't necessarily make them a supernatural entity, I guess, but you have at least 2 entities that seem supernatural in nature, right? With Rika and whoever the other figure is that she talks to in some of those scenes. Who I actually think, like I've said before, I think is just Oyashiro-sama. I think there's also the small chance that they're like both Oyashiro-sama, right? And it's like one of those things where it's like they've kind of been like fragmented almost. And together they're the original Oyashiro-sama. Either way, though, they have some kind of like powers clearly. And so it's not when you have a world where you have people time looping like this and who have lived hundreds of years, is it really that much of a stretch to say there could be aliens? Like, not really. To be honest, not really. So I think it's possible. I definitely think it's possible. And so I don't know. Like, it's not that I fully subscribe to the belief, but it's more like if these parasites are aliens, I wouldn't be shocked, right? At this point, right? It wouldn't shock me that much, right? And kind of, I guess, same of like Oyashiro-sama, right? It wouldn't really shock me at this point. I don't think it would be that out of line. And it could be a decent explanation for them, right? Like, sure, right? I don't know what else could be under there, like in the swamp, that they would have needed to seal it like that. I really don't know. So I guess I believe in the alien theory. I guess. It's not like something I'm willing to go to bat for, but it's more like I don't know what else would be hidden in that swamp, right? That they felt that they had to seal away, right? I don't know. Unless that's like maybe there's like a secret lab or something like that. Those are my best guesses. Really, I don't fully know what's going on in the swamp that they felt the need to seal it. like I said, I don't think the alien thing is completely impossible, I guess. I think that's more or less everything I needed to talk about, which most of that I think is basically I'm like, I don't think anything, like there were really any advanced guesses there. My guesses were my pick for the main villain did the disaster for the reasons that I predicted 2 chapters ago. And that Rena Loki might have been right about a lot of things. Like they said, basically what they said in the tip. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, maybe we just need to roll with that, right? I don't know. Not the most well thought out like additions to my theories, but like I said, I'm not gonna spend like ages and ages working on theories anymore. Or I don't want to say anymore. Like for Higu at this point, you know, whenever we get to like Umineko, I'll probably do the same thing. But like while I'm on Higu, chapter 6, going into chapter 7, where I'm like, they're gonna start giving me the answers next chapter. I'm willing to bet, right? It looks very clearly like this is a setup to like start giving some of the answers. If I had to guess, next chapter we're gonna get the mechanics behind the Hinamizawa craziness. And maybe some of the backstory on that. And then in the final chapter, we're going to learn exactly like why the great disaster is happening, who is doing it, who the villain has been the whole time. That's my guess, right? Roughly, like rough outline. But like, I don't think they're going to jam all of that into one chapter. They'll probably spread it across the next 2, right? If I had to guess. So yeah, but the point is, like, the answers are coming. I'm not going to spend, at this point, like, a ton of time theorizing. This does feel like, I guess, like, the last bastion of if you want to solve this on your own, like, you got to do it now. But I already did so much theorizing. I'm like, we're mostly done. And I know I keep looping this point. But, like I said, I'm probably going to do a little more tonight, but I'm mostly just going to get ready to play Chapter 7. And that should be coming soon. I wouldn't be shocked if I play it when I get home from work tomorrow. That's if I don't take a nap, but I love taking naps, so we'll see. Either way, it should be coming soon. I'm really excited for Chapter 7 to really see where this game goes and how it concludes, see how many of my theories were right, if I was on the right track with a lot of things, or if I was miles off. Who knows? I'm looking forward to figuring that all out. I hope you guys are as well. I've enjoyed Chapter 6 as a whole. This is officially the last episode of Chapter 6. The extras were, I'll be honest, they were mostly not, they were kind of nothing burgers, right? But, I mean, for the most, they were relatively interesting to see. Specifically, the very first bad end was kind of interesting. The second one was absolutely nothing. And the third one was just kind of like a, don't commit murder, there is help in the world. Which, nice message and all. But not like super fundamental to have done that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video anyways. I'll be honest, this video is probably pretty skippable. If I'm being completely honest. I hope you enjoyed it for what it was anyways. I guess I hope my commentary kept it interesting enough to watch. And if not, my bad. New content coming soon. So I hope to see all of you guys there. But until then, peace.